8 of Descent into the Wormhole, where we discuss everything from ancient civilizations to modern day social issues and everything in between. I'm Les.
And I'm Stevie J, and today we're going to take a deep dive into 9/11 in this two-part series. This being part two. If you haven't seen part one or listened to part one, go back and check that out. But we are questioning the official story of 9/11. Were we told the truth? Well, take a deep dive with us, put on your tinfoil hat, grab that coffee, and let's find out. Ooh.
Mm-mm-mm.
So, in the last episode, we talked about the Pentagon, we talked about Shanksville, we talked about hijackers and a whole lot of other stuff. But today we're getting into what I would say is the meat and bones of what happened on 9/11 and the
Yeah.
Twin Towers.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's devastating at one end and then so confusing at the other end, because
Right.
there's so many moving pieces and so many moving parts within this thing that it seemingly is easily explained away,
hmm
but is completely not. It is not.
Right.
There's too many questions about laws and like actual physics, and
Yeah.
there's just too many unanswered questions
Yeah.
that I just think are the people need and deserve answers to.
I agree. I agree. And look, we are talking about the Twin Towers today, and that's where the majority of people died. And that
Yeah.
was really, really sad and horrible. And, that's part of the reason why we're doing this. That's the main reason we're doing this, is to
Yeah.
look into what is the truth, like what actually happened. Because the mainstream story that we were fed, the 9/11 Commission report, the government narrative, it really just doesn't make sense. Like you said, all it leaves you with is either having to have blind faith in believing in magic, or it
Mhm.
leaves you with just questions, massive, massive
Yeah.
questions that haven't been answered to this day. So,
Right.
I mean, I guess we should start off doing a little recap. So, the official story being that at 8:46, Flight 11 was flown into the North Tower in New York, and at 9:03, Flight 175 was flown into the South Tower, allegedly
Mhm.
hijacked by 19 Al Qaeda terrorists. We've talked a little bit about that and the hijackers, but
Mhm.
that's the official narrative and timing, and that jet fuel burned in the Twin Towers and made them collapse. That's the official story.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's rip that one apart. Let's rip the official story apart.
I am looking forward to this.
Okay. Okay. So the first plane going in at 8:46. There were reports, there were 911 calls of people calling in because there was a plane flying really, really low over the Hudson that morning with a fighter jet flanking it.
Hmm. Interesting.
Mhm.
That doesn't sound right, considering they said they couldn't scramble any jets to intercept any planes or to do anything.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, what?
So I got some questions for people on that one. Like if
Hmm?
I would love to speak to someone who was in that vicinity, like in the vicinity of New York that day, who could probably corroborate that, because we don't know. Like we're just
Right.
going by what information we're finding and digging up. But there were two or three calls apparently to 911 saying that there's this a commercial liner and it's flying really close to the Hudson, and I don't know if they're going to make an emergency landing into the Hudson. I don't know
Right.
what's going on. Like, are you aware of what's going on? And then the next calls were that plane just went to the building.
Right. Interesting. That is
Hmm.
very, very interesting. And that leads me to another question. And you're right, like that we don't know, but that just leaves a
Yeah.
huge, huge question over everything. And
Yeah.
that leads me to another question that I have, is that um, just tagging on to that fact that people saw a jetliner going around and there was a military plane flagging it or flanking it. Um, the US have four E4B airplanes. And the E4Bs are those airplanes that you see with the little dome on top. that are used as command centers or control centers from the sky. And so 3 of them were being used on the war games, the exercises that we talked
Mm-hmm.
about on 9/11. But one of them was unaccounted for, officially unaccounted for, yet was seen flying over Washington as well, because people reported that, seeing that as well. So
Hmm.
but I want to be clear to people here, that was not mentioned in the official report at all. That E4B command plane, not mentioned at all in the
Mm-hmm.
commission report. Just left out, completely ignored, like many other
It's
things.
convenient. It's convenient.
But talking about that plane that you just mentioned and the E4B being around as well,
Mm-hmm.
I have to ask you. I have to ask
Mm.
you. Do you think that pilots were controlling those planes?
No, I think they were because they what's it called? I forget what it's called, but they have something on the planes that can be overridden. So someone from another location can fly the plane. It's a safety measure. It's a safety tactic that something happens to the pilot. It's a flick of a switch and someone else automatically takes over. And I think that's what happened. I think because as soon as I heard there was a fighter jet flanking this plane. I was like, well, like son of a bitch, he was flying it. He was
Yeah.
flying the plane.
Yeah.
He was in control of it, and he just needed to make sure that he didn't run into anything but his target.
Right. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Or it was someone in a simulation situation. Like there were so many different, like maybe it was a patsy, like maybe it was some guy who was in a simulation
Yes.
practice, just minding his own business on a whatever Tuesday morning or whatever it was. And next thing you know, he's the person who actually flew this plane into the building, and he was just doing his
Yep.
simulation for the day. That's all he was doing. We don't know what they did to these poor people to make this happen. We don't know who was hoodwinked,
Right.
who was thrown under the bus. We just don't know. But I don't think there was anyone in those planes. I think much like that gentleman that we watched the other night, Field. His first name was Field. Do you remember his name?
I don't remember his name, unfortunately, but he was a very intelligent guy.
He
Lots of
was.
information.
Yeah. He thinks that the planes were swapped.
Yes. Yeah. And
And that makes sense to me.
yeah, and me too. And that was the guy who was talking about the um, the autopilot system that you were talking about, which is a
Yes.
remote control
Yes.
autopilot system. That people won't believe this when we tell them. It was patented back in the 50s. This technology was patented back in the 50s and implemented
Yep.
in airliners essentially ever since. And we're not making this stuff up. The patent was available. You could find the patent. If you search it, I'm sure you could find it. But this technology absolutely exists. And I agree. I believe it was used on 9/11. And
Mhm.
it's no big deal to flick on an autopilot, a remote autopilot, and control the plane. People do it every single day as drone pilots. They sit there
Mhm.
in their computer and they fly these things around. So,
Yeah.
and like you said, to make these people who are not necessarily complicit in the action and with the war games going on, they say, "All right,
Mhm.
Johnny, sit down. Today, your war game task, your exercise is to fly this plane in the simulator into the World Trade Center."
You're the hijacker.
Exactly.
Today, you're the hijacker. And son of a bitch,
Yes.
was he fucking not the hijacker,
He was.
in my own humble opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So little Johnny sitting at his computer is actually the fucking hijacker who's
Yeah.
flying these planes into the World Trade Center, thinking he's doing it in a simulation, but he's really doing it
Yeah.
in real life. And look,
Yeah.
let's not blow sunshine up anybody here. The governments are not there to enact and fulfill your best interest. They are just not there to
Right.
do that, and so they don't care about little Johnny. They'll make him disappear in a heartbeat. And look, this
Mhm.
is just our opinion, of course, but it's been shown throughout history over
Mhm.
and over and over again. And if people don't believe us, if people do not believe us about these false flag operations, just take a look at Operation Northwoods. That is
Yeah.
an official that is an official fucking false flag document that has been released to the public, and
Yep.
it details how the US government, CIA, FBI, all of these agencies, military generals signed off on this to say, let's bomb our own people. Let's, drop bombs, missiles, attack our own people, call it Cuba, and what do you know? That gives us the license to then go in and invade and take over.
Yeah.
And so that, people listening, watching, that is an official government document from the US from 1962, Operation Northwood. And the only reason that shit didn't happen is because JFK said, are you guys fucking nuts? Are you guys fucking crazy? We're not doing this. That's the only
Yeah.
reason it didn't happen. It was signed off by all the Joint Chiefs of Staff and everything.
He didn't do it. Someone else did.
Mm.
I think it's just really odd that they would release it and then actually like follow through with it, because there's no coincidences. We know that there's no coincidences. So what are you going to say? Oh, well, maybe someone, maybe Al Qaeda got a hold of this thing and said, hey, that's a great idea. That could have happened. Honestly, that could have happened, because if you're looking at this and you're like, how can I fuck over the US? How can I do this? Oh, look, they gave me the plan right here. But it was cleaned up too quickly. But it would make sense. It would still be an investigation today, I feel like it would, and they would make sure that it would make sense.
Yeah.
If someone from outside of the US actually did this, they would make sure it made sense. So they had, all their turkeys in a circle to make sure that they're going after the right people. This was just a pure hoodwinking and gaslighting.
Yeah.
And fucking murder.
It was. And it's a steaming pile of shit. That's what it is. It's absolute bullshit. Everything that they've said, essentially, in the official sense. Now, we said at the beginning of this, like, we don't sit here and say we know the absolute truth. But that's the problem. We don't know the absolute truth, but we can, through the evidence that we've seen and the research that you and I have done, see the bullshit. That's what we can see. And we can see that these bastards are lying. So, I mean, with we touched on the planes there for a second, so maybe we just stay there. And the photos, right? The photos of the planes, the images that we have of the planes crashing into the towers. Now, the first one does appear to be, or at least have the markings of United Airlines. Fair enough. That's fine. But the second one is far, far more interesting.
Yeah.
Far more interesting. And, we see in the first one, the first plane, it's got the white and silver. It's very light colored and everything like that. But if you look very, very closely at the second plane, it's almost completely black.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't look right. And it's completely black. And a lot of people have said that it's a black plane, and American Airlines isn't, they're just not.
Yeah.
My theory, and this is just my theory and my crazy thoughts alone, my tinfoil hat, is that plane was supposed to be first, because no one ever looks up. No one ever looks up.
Yes.
So that plane was supposed to be first, because as in our YouTube version of this, I'm going to slow down the plane actually going in, because coming out the other side, there's things being thrown out that look eerily like missiles of some sort, because they're flying fast. Like you could, like I had to go frame by frame to capture it.
Yeah.
They go so fast. So, and that came first. Like, I don't know. I think that was supposed to be the first plane. I think someone screwed up. I think that was supposed to be the first plane. And while everyone was looking up, oh, look, it's an American airline.
Right.
It's the actual, so everyone can see, no, I saw it. Yes. But now we're left with this black plane that no one can explain.
That's right.
I've never heard an official explanation for that.
No, well, there isn't. And again, like the 9/11 report, commission report and everything, just conveniently leaves that out, leaves everything out. Any questions that there are, or any facts that are missing, they just leave it out, and or brush it off for saying it's not important. But I see that as critically important, and I agree with you. And it's funny that you mentioned missile things coming out, projectiles coming out the other side, because and now I feel like I'm going to matchy with you and put my tinfoil hat on, show you all my crazy, because
Oh, you're fucking crazy.
because my theory is, and in one of the images, and this may show up in the frames that we show to the YouTube audience, is the plane is angled. I'm going to say I'm looking at the plane from the rear, the second plane, and it's angled to the left. All right.
Right.
And the sun is shining from the right-hand side. And you can see very bright, clear reflection on the Trade Center itself as the plane's about to hit it. But with the underside of the plane exposed, which would be pointing towards the sun, if it had a silver bottom or a white paint job on the plane, like a United Airlines plane, there would have been a very bright reflection from the underside of that plane of the sun. It would have been well lit, but it wasn't. It was completely black, and it was dark, and it was almost like it was in shadow.
It was almost like a matte black.
Right, exactly. And the other thing I found interesting of that is you can, if you zoom in really closely, you can just see two white cylinders under the fuselage of the plane. Now, there is no commercial airliner that I've ever flown on or ever seen that has two little, and I'm just going to say missile-looking cylinders attached to the fuselage of a commercial plane. So my theory is that, and we're going to get into the structural integrity of buildings and planes in a second, but my theory is that they actually fired a missile first into the plane, into the building, just before impact, so that it would allow the plane to actually damage the World Trade Center. Yep. That's what I believe. Yeah.
Because it should have never have happened.
No, not at all. And so for these 110-story steel-framed concrete foundation buildings, funnily enough, were built to withstand a plane strike. And that came straight from the architect of the buildings.
Yep. What was it? It was he made it structurally sound for the biggest airplane at that time.
Right.
It was a
707.
707, that's it. Yeah. So they were, and so I know there's going to be people out there, well, it wasn't a 707, so that completely negates. No, it was actually designed to withstand an airplane hitting it, because, and rightfully so, it's so tall, shit happens. Like accidents do happen. And when you do have buildings that tall, you gotta think of these things.
Of course.
And there are so many statements from people saying they never thought it was going to happen. You know, they never even put this into the thought process when they were building it. No, fucking right, they did. Right, they did.
You know what? When you know, George Bush, Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell, like Rumsfeld, whoever the politician was coming out at the time saying, "Oh, we never would have expected this. Like there was just no thought of it ever." It's like, I call bullshit. Like you fucking people are just lying through your teeth, and you've done this horrible thing to the American people, and subsequently, you know, to the world afterwards. But to believe that airplanes, and this isn't me saying it, this is engineers, this is architects, this is aerospace engineers, say, no, no, the aeroplanes could not cause that amount of damage that was alleged. Because if you think about an aeroplane and you think about flight in general, to get anything off the ground, it has to be light, doesn't it? It has to be very, very light. So they don't build planes out of solid steel. They don't build them out of really heavy materials. It's built out of aluminium, which in itself is very soft, and it's also light. So planes are essentially like, you could imagine it as a piece of paper flying through the air, really. And so even though it was traveling at over 400 miles an hour, doesn't make any difference. All that does is increase the energy towards the plane, not towards the building, because the building is strong. Like, that is built with hundreds and hundreds of thick steel beam columns. And what that would do to an airplane is turn it into mush. It would turn it
Yeah.
into nothing, basically. Not
Yeah.
in the poof sense, like we're told, but
Yeah.
it would certainly destroy the plane without causing really any great damage to the building.
Yeah. It would have, it would still be standing. Let's just put it that way.
It would certainly still be standing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they tell us that it's I really liked this part of it where they tried to tell us that because the twin towers were built in 1970s with at the time fire retardant on all of the
Yeah.
columns, on all of
Yes.
main building structures.
Yep.
And building one was built with asbestos up to
Hmm.
about the 75th level because then they realized, oh, asbestos is bad. So they stopped.
Yeah.
But
And it was more expensive to take it off than just to leave it on and deal with the
right.
repercussions later. Yeah, they did a cost loss analysis, and keeping it on was more beneficial for them.
Yeah.
So and what is asbestos?
Well, it's a natural fire retardant.
Well,
So
fuck me.
exactly. Exactly. It's a natural fire retardant. So despite the fact the official story said, oh, when the planes came in, because they're so strong and they're tough planes, they knocked off. This is what they said, that the
Yeah,
fire retardant was knocked off the columns as
all
it
of
went
them.
in. All of them.
All of them. All of them, every single one, because that makes sense from top to bottom, tip to tail. You flick at it and it all comes off. As I like to say, it was licked off by kittens. I that is an easier story for me to swallow than it all fell off.
Yes. Me too.
No, like on the eighth floor, it fell off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, come on now. Just believe. Believe what you're told. Like,
I believe in a lot of crazy shit. This is not one of them.
well, that's a fair point. I mean, I believe in unicorns, so maybe don't take my word
Yeah.
for it. But, um,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. Like, it's a more plausible story to believe the kittens licked it off because no, that
Yes.
didn't happen.
Yeah. No.
And to suggest that a 110-story building was brought down by fires
Mhm.
that only happened on a few floors and
Mhm.
were only burning with kerosene and jet
Mhm.
fuel, which
Yep.
burns only at about 12 to 1500 degrees max,
Yep.
and the melting point for steel is over 2000 degrees.
Yeah.
So, and this is just it. There's so many facts that point holes in the official story that we have to
Right.
keep asking. We have to keep asking the questions. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I guess, you would agree with me, right? Fire didn't bring down the towers.
Oh, no. No, 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 no. There is just no way because them both coming down in their own footprint the way they did.
Yeah.
No, it just doesn't make sense because they would have toppled. They would have toppled. They would have never have come in like in on themselves.
Hmm.
And there is a thing called the Richter scale and seismic impact. And there was really no seismic impact when these things fell,
Right. Yeah.
like none.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into this part where nothing actually fell, but or by the time it got to the ground. But before that, I just want to give one example of this whole theory that certain floors were on fire and that weakened the entire building structure and then it collapsed. I just want to give this visual to people. If you're cutting a tree down, right? You're cutting a tree down with a chainsaw. Firstly, read all the warnings before you use said chainsaw. But if you're cutting a tree down, if you're cutting a tree down, right, and you cut it in the center, let's even say 3/4 of the way up, you start cutting.
Mhm.
You cut it all the way through. What happens? The top tips off, doesn't it,
Yeah.
and falls to the ground, and
Yeah.
the rest of the tree underneath that cut is still remaining. It's still standing.
Right.
It's strong. You didn't cut all
Yes.
the roots out, so it's still standing. The
Yeah.
same theory applies to the World Trade Centers because even if you cut them off with fire or whatever you want to say at you know that 3/4 mark, the top of the building would just topple off the rest because it's still strong underneath that, and it
Right.
certainly couldn't collapse in 9 seconds.
No,
Not a chance.
no, it honestly, it would have taken its time. It would have crumbled and then it would have become more unsteady. I would have said it would have taken like a day for it to fall down piece by piece, like floor,
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
it gets unstable and then it breaks a little
But
more and then it gets
yeah.
a little more unstable. But the fact that they both fell so elegantly to the ground and
Right.
one fell whoosh,
Yeah. Hmm.
um, with minimal like it didn't like the debris went far, but when it comes to the actual leftover pieces, one lot there.
Not there at
Not a
all.
lot
Ooh.
there. Yeah, nothing there at all, actually.
Ooh. I can't
Just
wait.
a few bits of the walls.
Yep. And I can't wait for you to tell us about this because I love this theory. It's so good. But just wanted to make sure I didn't forget because people are going to say, well, surely there's been buildings in the past that have collapsed due to fire. Now, there has been, I want to just be very clear here, there has been 3 buildings that have collapsed due to
Right.
fire in history. That's World Trade Center 1, World Trade
Hmm.
Center 2, and World
Hmm.
Trade Center 7, if
Yep.
you go by the official story. No other steel framed skyscraper building has ever collapsed due to fire. Now, I'm going to give a couple examples here. So, 1991, the Meridian Hotel burned for 18 hours. Nothing happened. It
Right.
still stood. They repaired the damage. Fine. In 2004, a building in Caracas burnt for 26 hours. Same thing. Still standing. Repaired the damage. All fine. And this is going to blow people's noodles. It's really going to blow their minds because in 1975, both the North and South Tower of the World Trade Center caught fire and burnt for hours and did not collapse. So, with that, I would love to hear you tell us about where all the material went.
So where did the buildings go? Because the official story is they went to the pieces remaining went to China. For what? We don't know. But if they must have reality shifted them because no one saw these big, huge steel beams
Right.
and pieces of concrete leaving New York, like downtown Manhattan. So Judy Wood is a very interesting gal, and she's a smarty pants. She's got degrees at the yin yang. She's not a rookie when it comes to this stuff.
Right.
She knows it, and she's written a book called "Where Did the Towers Go?" And she thinks, and this is just her theory, that it was Nikola Tesla technology, interferometry, that pulverized
Ooh.
the building.
Ooh.
It dustified it.
Now, I got a question with that because, yes, socks blown off.
Yes.
Um, is this a visible weapon or is
No,
it invisible?
it's invisible.
Ooh, makes so much sense
Yeah.
because you see the towers dustify, right? Like
Yeah.
as they allegedly collapse, you actually see pieces of concrete just turning to dust on the way down.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
people's, perception of this could be, well, it's just a small piece, like it's like dropping a bag of flour from the top of a building. It just kind of all, you know, floats off and disappears.
Yep.
But no, these were bits of concrete, chunks of concrete that weighed hundreds of tons,
Hmm.
thousands of tons,
Hmm.
and steel and all of these things. It doesn't just turn into powder all of its
Right.
own accord.
Exactly. And she said that what she likes to do is when she's looking at things, she likes to turn the sound off. So she's not getting the official narrative. So it's filling her head with things that she's going to, start to see. She started seeing it without the sound, and that's what she noticed. And she said her friend did the same thing. And when they were talking, he said, it just turned to dust, like it turned to nothing. And to back up her theory, there were the seismic impact. They did the measurements of the seismic impact from buildings 1 and building 2. So the seismic impact lasted for dropping a bowling ball dropped from the tower. It was 8 seconds. The tower lasted 9. It was a free fall. It was a
Right.
free fall. And unfortunately, there was really no seismic impact. There was really nothing. It was just a little jolt, and that was it. And they have theories that what those little jolts were. But she said that if if the building was to collapse onto itself, she said, the buildings were built into the Hudson. Like there
Yes.
was a basin. They were built into the basin of the Hudson to be structurally sound. So everything would have collapsed in on that because you got a subway running underneath it. So
Hmm.
you have hollow space.
Yeah.
And so you crack all that and the water would have come rushing in. You would have had flooding. You would have had
Yes.
flooding.
Yeah.
And because it just would have been just way too much. Like that's a lot of concrete and steel coming down all at once.
Hmm.
Imagine the impact. Like
Yeah.
that would have been a massive earth shattering
Oh,
oomph
huge.
going on.
And
And there was nothing.
exactly. And you're right. Like when you talk about weight, like 200,000 tons each building.
Yeah.
That, that that is a phenomenal amount of weight. 200,000 tons. That's
All
huge.
coming down at the same time.
Exactly, exactly. All falling down on top of itself. But
Yeah.
I think Judy is onto it because not only is she extremely smart, but I like the way she approaches it because she doesn't say, well, I think this is what happened based on my fanciful ideas. She's a doctor,
Yeah.
she's a physicist, she's all of these very, very intelligent things. But she
Yeah.
says, I just look at what I can see. And what I see is these buildings disappearing. And what could do
Yeah.
that, of course, is the next question. So that's when she looks at the interferometry, was it? And
Yeah.
what about? Didn't she also point out some damaged police vehicles and cars a long
Ooh.
way away from the
Yes.
towers?
Yes. So there were cars blocks and blocks away that she calls toasted because there's no other way to explain it because they weren't burnt. They weren't burnt because like the police cars, the lights, which are plastic, were not melted, but the car up and like the first half of the car up until like the back seats doors, it kind of stopped. It looked like it was on fire and then it stopped. But it wasn't fire because it wasn't hot, like blocks and blocks away.
Yeah,
Like it was way too far to be explained that that's what happened from the plane, like the planes going into the building and the building collapsed. Like if my neighbor's house collapses, my car's not going to get damaged.
right, exactly.
It's not going
It
to catch
doesn't.
on fire
Yeah, it's not going to
and
get
burn only
toasted.
halfway.
Hmm.
It just doesn't make sense. And then she was noticing that some cars were wrong way up, like they were wheels up
Yep.
instead of wheels down. She's like, well, how does that happen?
Yeah.
Like what happened? And I was actually looking and there's a few pictures of cars on top of each other. So you have a car and then a car landed wrong way up on the other one. And it's like complete, it looks like it came from a scrapyard. It's all rusted already.
Yeah. Oof.
And it's like, how did that happen? But no paper was caught on fire. Like there was a
Yes.
parking lot just across
Yes.
the way, and it was covered in paper, but yet the cars caught on fire.
Hmm.
It wasn't the paper that caught on fire; it was the cars
Yeah.
because the cars were on fire and the paper stayed put.
Yep. And the plastic lights on top of the police vehicle,
Yeah.
that would absolutely melt in fire. And
Yep.
when you have fire, you have heat. And when you have heat, you have, even if a specific part of the vehicle is not burnt, it will still have heat marks or scorch marks from the
Right.
heat. So
Yep.
on one of those examples, I can't remember if it was the police car, but the damage or the toasting goes up to literally a straight line of one of the
Yep.
doors, and
It
then
was a police car.
and then the paintwork is completely fine and untouched after that.
Yep.
That's not what you see from a fire because
Yep.
there would be scorch marks and heat distortion all the way up. Yet
Yeah.
in that same vehicle, and you talked about the paper, the seats are stripped back to wire. Like it's
Yeah.
just the bare wire of the seats sitting there. And it's how like how can that happen? And so the technology that Judy Wood's talking about, I imagine it's like a directed energy technology
Yeah,
because
it's direct. Those are exact words. Directed. They directed energy and used it as a weapon.
wow,
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is just it. Like, to people who are listening, watching, we are just simply looking at what we see, looking at what
Mhm.
other people see as well, and applying that to what could be possible. Because, if you also think, people think that the governments tell them everything, like, and
I know. It's cute.
divulge all the information and technology that
Yeah.
they have. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
come on, people, that doesn't happen.
No.
So to say, oh, they couldn't have possibly have that kind of technology, we'd know about it. No, no, we
No.
wouldn't. We wouldn't know anything about
No.
it. And I think it was with the distance. I think it was about 500 yards. I think was that some of those cars.
It was
And
far enough away that it was a head scratcher.
right, and they didn't have a plane hit them, did they?
No. No.
So it
They
wasn't.
did not.
It wasn't fires and causing structural damage inside the police car,
No. No.
unless they had little remote control planes as well. But we we didn't get that in the official story either.
We didn't get a lot of things in the official story. But what
True.
she also mentioned before we go away from Judy was that the first responders were complaining that their boots were like the metal in their boots, their steel toe boots were melting, but their feet weren't hot.
Yes.
Like there was something really odd going on
Mm.
with the metal in their boots, but their feet weren't burning. She said you would think like the soles are rubber, the
Hmm.
soles would have melted and it was just the metal. So something was going on with metal. It was directed energy that was going to affect metal. And it makes sense because the cars, metal, paper didn't get touched. So like
Ooh, yeah.
just
It's
dustified it. It just
yeah.
it just turned the metal to mush.
And so
To
that's a really, I forgot about that. The first responder safety boots with steel caps and
yeah.
melting, but not actually getting a burnt foot or feeling
Yeah.
any heat. So the
Yeah.
molecular structure was literally being disintegrated by whatever
Yeah.
the energy weapon was.
Yeah.
Ooh, so interesting.
Yeah. And here's the thing, when it comes like as soon as I heard that, I was like, holy shit, I need to know how these people are today. Like, what's their health like?
Yes.
Like having that much directed energy that we don't know what it's capable of doing to us. Like, look what it's capable of doing to metal. What is
Mm,
it doing to us? I was like, like, how are these people? But if they can explain it away by asbestos,
mhm.
well, fuck, they won.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And that's just it. Like they set this whole thing up. They knew the first responders. Now, I wrote this down because 70% of first responders became critically ill by
Yeah.
2006.
Yep.
70%.
Yep.
And not to mention the others who died as well. So,
Yeah.
absolutely, it's a way to cover all of this up with sickness, with people not being able to speak or with passing away. And of course,
Yeah.
we have to, of course, when government's involved, also allow for a portion who were just simply paid off because that
Yeah.
would occur as well. And look,
Yeah.
people are people, and that stuff will happen. But um, such an interesting theory, and there's a great video on that by Judy Wood as well. A great interview with Judy Wood on Gaia. So people
Mhm.
should definitely check that out. But
Yeah.
um, so look, we agree. We agree. The towers, they certainly weren't hit by um, planes of a commercial airliner standard. They were not brought down by burning jet fuel, and they were basically disappeared. Is the word I would
Mhm.
use. They were disappeared.
Now, what about bombs? Like, because they said it looked like a controlled demolition, and you're the expert in that area. So, what do you think?
Well, you know what? Like, to be honest, that was my first thought when I saw the towers come down. Was that just looks like a controlled demolition to me.
Yeah.
And I've had experience with explosives and
Yeah.
with destroying targets with explosives, and um, at first glance, yeah, it does actually look like a lot like a controlled demolition. But I think when I look closer at that, there's a lot of constraints with that. I feel in that to bring down a building like the World Trade Centers, you would have to take considerable time and care in placing those charges to get that exact effect of them falling into themselves. Now, the
Yeah.
World Trade Centers is in 1 and 2, the big ones, the Twin Towers. I think that Judy Wood's theory makes a whole lot more sense
Yeah.
because it was an energy weapon directed at the buildings that could essentially now there was police cars and things off to the side that were damaged. But if you imagine now, remember the movie Independence Day?
Hmm.
Remember what that first alien strike where the beam went straight down into the top of, I think it was the Empire State Building, and the building went boom, 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 boom down from there. If the energy weapon used in 9/11 was directed in the same fashion down, you would see what we saw, which looks like a controlled demolition with the floors blowing out as it goes down. But they
Hmm.
were actually disappearing. And what we saw was just some dust left over.
Right.
Um, so that would make sense to me. Um, but as far as a controlled demolition, it does look like that. More so, probably for me, is Building 7 that looks like
Yeah.
a controlled demolition because in the Twin Towers, like Judy says, they just disappeared. They just poof,
Yeah.
gone. But with Building 7, that very much looks like because you don't see each floor blowing out on the way down or
Right.
disappearing on the way down. What you essentially see is it looks like it was made from cardboard and somebody's filled it with water and it's just, gone all wonky and fallen down.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
that looks like a controlled demolition.
Now the funny thing is that there were reports of bomb like noises going off because everyone in the streets was saying like when the bomb went off because they were saying that the lobby when they got when some of the people did finally get out they said holy shit the lobby looks like it just ended like it just got completely
Yeah.
destroyed by a bomb. So they were saying that they heard it, but with Building 7 there were no bombs. It just it felt like it was a tree falling in the forest and no one was there to hear it. That's exactly how like it was so silent and quiet and I don't know, there was like an eeriness to it that
Yeah.
it
It
just
just
went.
it just disappeared. Like if you watch the footage, it kind of looks like the building just gave up and
Yeah. It's
decided to
had
have a
enough.
sleep. It's like, guys, I'm fucking out of here. I gotta go to sleep. Like this is today has been too much. but the thing about those explosions, yes. So there was reports in the lobbies of the World Trade Center 1 and 2 and of Building
Yeah.
7 as well. Sorry, of not of Building 7, of 1 and 2, that the lobbies were blown out. Now that does sound to me like explosives were
Yes.
used there because what I heard from those first responders was things like they were blown backwards. That's the blast wave or the shock wave from because anything to do with explosives is essentially pressure. That's what it
Yeah.
does. Is it exerts energy in a form of pressure. So these people were blown backwards, windows were blown out, elevators were destroyed, and
Yeah.
sadly the first responders mentioned people coming out, grievous injuries
Yeah.
from elevators. But that was that was before the collapse, and these things were these explosions were happening, and you heard people say, "Oh, when the bomb went off, there's a bomb going on."
Yeah.
Like it wasn't us making it up. Like it's not us sitting here making this stuff up. These are
Yeah. No,
people
they said it.
who said it at the time, and
Yeah.
I mean, World Trade Center 7. The other thing with that is that it wasn't hit with a plane.
No.
It, they said that debris made it catch on fire.
Which is odd because there were other buildings in and around before Building 7.
Yep.
And I just want to touch on something before we move to Building 7.
Sure.
The fact that both buildings 1 and 2 fell within not a lot of striking distance between each other.
Right.
Building 2 went and then Building 1 went. The odds of physics of that actually happening because it was two different planes hitting at the structure at two different places and yet they both collapsed in on themselves in on their own footprint in the same manner within like a half hour or so of each
Yeah.
other.
Bullshit.
Bullshit. Bullshit. It's impossible. It is impossible for that to happen. There are no coincidences. No, because it's structurally they would have been hit differently. So they would have never collapsed in the same manner because structurally they were hit differently.
Yep.
So I just want to put that in. But let's talk about Building 7 and how certain people seem to know about it before the building knew. Like the
Yes.
building was the last to know.
Yeah. The building's like, oh, is it now? Do I go now? All right, I'm going to fall over now. Well, Because the BBC, there's a BBC
So fucking
reporter,
stupid.
and yeah, there's footage of this BBC reporter, right?
Yep.
And in the background, she's like, and we've heard that World Trade Center Building 7 has now collapsed as well. And it's standing there in the background
Yep.
behind her in the video. You
Yep.
can't make that shit up. Like, it's there.
No. I'm
And
going to insert into the YouTube
yes,
portion of
please
this.
do that. That
Yeah.
would be very interesting for people. And
Yeah.
the anchor, so the guy back in the newsroom, he's also like, so he says it first, and he's like, "All right, we've just heard the building 7 has collapsed," and he cuts over to this woman, and she's standing there. And so when I think it was 12 minutes before the actual collapse, is when he first says it's already collapsed. Then they cut to her, and it's getting closer and closer, but it's still there. Building's still in the background. So 2 of them have said already, and this is BBC UK, not the US, so across another time zone as well, have already said that it's collapsed. So in real time, it was 12 minutes before the actual collapse that this news report came out saying it had collapsed. How'd they know that?
And that was the smoking gun of a fuck up.
Yep.
That was a fuck up because they said they had to pull it. They had
Mhm.
to pull it. Well, last time I checked, I'm pretty sure I can't just pull my house. I'm not aware of an escape lever.
Okay, everybody,
I'm not aware. I have
coming up
worked
on
in many a
episode
building.
9. Les is going to just pull her house on episode 9.
I've worked in many a building, and not once have they said, "Hey, in an emergency, this is the button you push. You will just pull the button. We'll just pull the building. It's fine."
Yeah, but they were preparing. They were preparing for it. Now, a couple of fun facts. I want to throw some fun facts in here for people.
Okay.
World Trade Center 7, building 47 stories high, same steel frame structure, built in the 80s, not the 70s like the other 2 buildings, but built in the 80s. It was home to many, many, many national security agencies, companies, emergency centers for government, right? It also had things like SEC, IRS, all of these financial places in the building. Now, the government at the time was under investigation for the loss of trillions of dollars that they couldn't account for, and that was an investigation that was happening, and a lot of those files and documents were in Building 7. Now, that's a little tidbit.
Funny how they weren't backed up on any kind of mainframe, hard drive or something. It was just a piece of paper, just a piece of paper. Oh,
yep,
it burned.
We're so sorry. We can't. We can't go on with that investigation anymore. We just don't know what to do.
Oopsie.
Chucks. But another thing to mention about Building 7 is that Larry Silverstein owned the building, and a month prior to 9/11, he increased the insurance policy by several million, and in that case, well, tens of millions of dollars prior to 9/11. And he was the one who was heard saying, "We need to pull it. We need to pull it."
Either he's psychic or crazy.
Yep.
Or
he's in on this fucking thing.
A mastermind. He's a mastermind.
Yep.
No one actually got injured. Like no one died in Building 7, right?
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so either, because it was a government building and they pulled everyone out.
Yeah, it was evacuated. Yeah.
So, they're praise be for that, right? Like at least you got that. That's a win. That's a win for the day.
Yes.
But I just can't believe that they fucked up so bad, and they can't say, and they're just like, they have no excuse for themselves.
Yeah. What can you say? It does not work. It does not fit. Like,
and the fact, it's just that we couldn't fuck up that badly and get away with it.
Well, you're right.
I can't say a name wrong and get away with it. Come on. Exactly. And these guys are getting away with this?
Yep. Yeah, it's ludicrous. No. It's absolutely fucking ludicrous. And to think that, so the other 2 buildings, okay, so the Building 1, Building 2, you mentioned it was within half an hour of each other. They collapsed, and within an hour and 42 minutes, from the initial plane strike at 8:46, both towers were down.
Right.
Or in our opinion, I would say they disappeared.
They did
Now,
disappear. Yeah.
Building 7 didn't collapse until 5:20
Right.
p.m. So, if we're to apply the same logic as what the 9/11 Commission report and the official narrative and government say, it was fire, burning hot, that weakened the structure and brought down Building 7. So the same bullshit story as the other two. But there was no plane, there was no jet
Right.
fuel, there was
Right.
none of that shit. And one other interesting thing I'd love to bring up and just let people know about is that on the morning of September 11th, 2001,
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
8 a.m., Building 7 had its alarm system turned to test mode for a period of
Yep.
8 hours.
Yep.
Hmm.
And when
That
did it
seems a
come
little
down?
5:20 p.m.
That's right. Right at the end of the test cycle.
Hmm.
Because he said we got to pull it. Yeah, because you're running out of test time.
Yeah. You got to.
You ran out of time.
You got to pull it. And so I
Yep.
feel like this leads us right into, somewhere I feel like we should do maybe a recap, or a little summary of what we think about. We talked about false flags, and you brought up that great list
Yep.
of checklists for false
Yeah.
flags. I believe
Yeah.
this meets every single fucking one of them.
Absolutely.
But the question is, who benefits?
Oh, well, the government benefited, didn't it? Because it got to invade Afghanistan,
Hmm?
got to go to war. Daddy
Yep,
Warbucks got to go to war.
exactly. And
Yeah.
and in a monetary sense, what does war bring with it?
Oh, it brings tons of money. It brings tons of money. And it also got it took a lot of liberties away from its citizens because that's when mass uh
Surveillance.
so that's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. Surveillance came into being.
Yep.
And Snowden is all over this. Like he's all over it. But it took away a lot of freedoms, and it terrified people. So I was in Florida the Christmas before lockdown started, and I was in the airport waiting to come home, and there was a couple of gals from New York, and like just having a chit chat in front of me, and the girl beside me, I don't know where the hell she was going, but she left her bag to go get a drink. And these girls lost their minds. And because I was like, well, what's the big deal? Like, I see her, she's right there.
Hmm.
I see the bag, but in that to them was the most terrifying thing. And I thought, oh shit, 9/11. Of course, of course. Like
Yeah.
this is how much it's impact them that they can't even handle seeing a lonely bag in an airport without losing their shit.
Yeah.
Like it's taken away their safety, it's taken away their ease, their sense of ease
Yes.
of just being able to travel.
Yep. And just be
For a
happy
lot of
and
people,
be.
just being able to go to work.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's so true.
Yeah.
And you're spot on. Like when you say it's, the government benefited and fear and like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it gave them license to remove freedoms and liberties from people. And
Yeah.
that what do they get for it? Applause. People clapping
Yep.
as their freedoms were taken away. The
Yep.
Patriot Act, and you had, torture being authorized as well in military facilities and all of those sorts
Mhm.
of things. The invasion of Afghanistan. Now,
Mhm.
we may do another discussion about that whole thing one day because, there's certain things everybody assumes oil, but one thing that Afghanistan is really, really, overwhelmed with is poppy seeds. They have lots and lots of poppy seeds,
Oh, look at that.
which go into the heroin trade, and we can talk about the
Yep.
CIA and how they're drug dealers a whole nother time. But
Oh, yes, please. Yes, please.
but there's lots of these motivations and you've got to
Yeah.
also look at what was the motivation of these people who benefited prior to the false flag operation. What were they trying to get done before the false flag operation? And if we go back, we can look at Afghanistan and Iraq and all of those things, weapons of mass destruction. You know what?
Yep.
They want regime change. They want to get their own hands on certain things, whether it be
Yep.
oil, whether it be poppies, whether it be just whatever it is. So
Yep.
I think that's a really, really key part of it. And of course, the money side of things, you've got companies like Halliburton, Lockheed, all of these big military companies who produce the materials to go to war,
Yep.
making billions and
Yep.
billions of dollars on contracts. And look,
Yep.
who's on those who's on the boards of those companies? Actually, a lot of people who were involved in doing the 9/11 Commission report.
Oh, look at
Um,
that.
so, do we believe the official story? Really?
No. And I just want to add here, because I don't believe it, but the thing that really tops the cake, or the cake for me, it's like the cherry on top. It's like the bride and groom having a great time. Not a lot of people know this. There was a hurricane headed directly towards Manhattan the morning of 9/11, and it was never fucking mentioned. This
Fuck me.
hurricane was never mentioned because it kept coming, and it turned, which makes me think they controlled the goddamn weather.
Wow. Fuck me. Because I'm so glad you brought that up. I forgot all about that. And yeah, now when a hurricane's coming in, you know probably better than me. But when a hurricane is approaching, it's not like a tornado where it happens out of like the thin air.
No,
It's
no,
really
yeah,
quick.
it's coming.
Like
Yeah,
you see it coming, and they give you
yeah,
warnings from days out. Like in 2 days'
yeah,
time, it'll be here. In 1 day, it'll be
yeah,
here. You
yeah,
know, batten down the hatches, people.
yeah. Or get out. Like it gives you a
Yep,
warning so you can actually get out and
yep,
get to safety.
yep. But
Never did it.
no mention of it. Never heard of it. Never
No,
knew anything about it. And
no.
yeah, I mean, if they've got the interferometry, I forgot the word,
Yeah,
technology, that energy technology,
yeah.
make buildings disappear. I agree with you.
You can
They can
you
they
can
can
change the
control the
weather.
weather.
Yeah.
Why not? Because all
I
it
d
is pressure and atmospheric and
Yeah.
vibration
Yep.
stuff. It's
Yeah.
can be done.
If you know how, yeah, exactly. So it's like, holy crap, like because they didn't say anything and there was no warnings up to it. So why didn't the weather people say anything? Why, like,
Yeah.
who is in on this? Who is in on this mass fucking murder
Wow.
when
Lots
the
and lots of
weathermen
people.
aren't even saying that there's a goddamn hurricane coming?
Yep. Well, it's all entangled in a web, I feel like. The mainstream media companies are really run by the governments, and
Yes,
they
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 are.
they get to push the narratives that the government wants,
Yeah.
and they get told to censor what the government says. So, it was a real, like you said, the BBC done fucked up when they put that footage out there of Building
Yeah.
7 behind the reporter, because you
Yeah.
can't lie then. You
Yeah.
can't do anything about that. It's there.
No.
Um so I agree with you though. I agree with you. I mean, it's just one big colossal mass murder, and it's disgusting. It's absolutely
Yeah.
disgusting, and
Yeah.
that so many people are made to believe that their government has
Yeah.
their interests at heart when they really clearly don't. In fact, they have their
Yeah.
own personal interests at heart. So
Yeah.
yeah, is there anything else you
So
wanted
sad.
to finish off with before we wrap up this most interesting episode?
Well, the thing is, we could go on for like another 5 hours, but for our listeners' sake, I think we should say goodbye.
Me too. I agree. Yes, we could probably go on for days on end about this, but
Yeah.
look, I really am. To people listening, to people watching, I would love to hear your thoughts and hear your comments below,
Yes.
because this is a topic you can clearly tell we're both very passionate about, and
Yeah.
we could talk about it forever. So, but we won't. We promise.
Only with each other.
Exactly. Only with each other. We won't put you guys through that. But yeah, I guess I would just finish off by saying always question everything. I hope you've got
Yeah.
something out of today and last week's episode. Sorry, yesterday's episode as well. And yeah, question everything.
Yeah. And I'm just going to sign off by saying if you lost someone on that day, my heart goes out to you. And I hope you get some sort of believable answer in the very near future, because I do believe Biden is releasing some probably heavily redacted. Um, he's releasing something to do with it. So we'll see. I just hope that the families get some sort of peace
Yes.
from something, because this is just atrocious. And my heart just goes out to you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Do. All right. Have a great day, everyone. See you later.
Bye guys.